All right. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
All right. So we are going to dive right in and talk listings and buyers today. The first thing I'd love to kind of start off more of a almost like a round table. So is there anybody on this phone or on this call today that is just your market has so many listings that it's just unreal? Anybody? Okay. So yeah, I think we're all in the same boat. Like there's tight listing inventory. So we want to look to see, are we, what are we doing? What are the adjustments that we need to make in order to make all of these pieces work? Historically low inventory. Now, so a lot of, when we think about inventory and we think about market shifting, a lot of times we think from seller's market to buyer's market. And what we're experiencing right now is a seller's market to an even tighter seller's market, right? So leads are going to be a lot fewer, and we've got to go out and find those. We can't afford to sit back. We also want to make sure that when we're dealing with our buyers, that we have buyers in the moment. So would love to start off with first just hearing from you guys. Who has taken a listing in January or February, and where did that listing come from?
Myself, and it comes, the three of them come from my sphere.
Right. So sphere. So and the reason I'm asking this is because so often we forget the basics. We start looking at the new and shiny, and it's sphere. So Sylvia's got them from sphere. Who else has had a listing so far this year, and where did they come from?
I got a listing. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
My listing came from a referral from an agent in Arizona, and I'm in California.
All right. So referrals from agents in another area. And some of us are going to be in better positions for that. Like Monroe, Louisiana, we don't have a ton of people moving into Monroe, Louisiana. She is where she's at in California. There's going to be, so that's definitely something we can explore. And then John.
So yeah, last month we had a pretty good month for sell by owners. So that was, and for 50% of our listings that came in last month were for sell by owner.
All right, and so I love that, John. And for everybody knows what those numbers were. So you ended up taking how many listings last month?
14.
14. And wow. 7 of those were for sell by owners, and the other was database?
Between sphere and repeat.
Sphere and repeat. Okay. All right. So, all right. Anybody else take a listing from any other places beside those that we just mentioned?
Yeah, I got one from my networking group.
Okay. So networking. Awesome. All right. So they're out there, and even sometimes I think we're tempted to say, well, there's not any, there's no listings. But if everybody on this phone, if you opened up your MLS, I promise you, no matter how tight your inventory is, houses were listed in the last 24 hours, right? The question was it with you or not, right? That's the big question. So, in this market, it's going to be a skill-based market. And so what are we doing to hone our skills? What are we doing to have enough conversations? How many of you are on the shift pivot calls in the morning on like 7:30? Okay, some of us. So if you're not, that's a really great call for everything from motivation to learning what other people are doing. And I'm going to share, this is something that James had shared on that really stood out to me as I was getting ready for this call. And this is from pages, I think it's a shift pages 49 and 50. So that's going to be something else. If you are not reading the shift book, because like I know we just finished a book and you're probably like, come on, Olivia, another book. Think of the shift book and the MREA as those are our manuals. So we're going to always be in them depending on what's going on. So you might choose to go and pull up your shift book and start reading different sections. Like, what does it pertain to us? Well, in there, and again, this is pages 49 and 50, he talked about just because the market shifts doesn't mean yours has to. As leads become fewer leads. Right now we have fewer leads because we have fewer listing leads is what we're talking about. As leads become fewer, you must make a more concerted effort to generate them. You cannot sit back. You must be more rigorous and resolute in your lead generation than ever before, and more so than anyone else. Now is the time to shift your lead gen to the highest gear possible. Shift Pivot for almost a year now. So starting back last March, they've been talking about hitting 40 contacts a day. Now, maybe you're not hitting 40 contacts a day, and I know how many contacts everybody on this in this Zoom call is making, and I know it's not 40. You might be thinking though, what would it take to do a 20% increase in February, right? So it might be, well, if I'm making 5, let me get to 8. If I'm making 10, let me get to 15. Ultimately, the way that I look at it, if you don't like your bank account or you don't like the number of listings that you have, we go back to lead generation. Like that's the number one piece. And then this is the part that really struck me with what James shared, and that's the finding the motivated. When a market shifts, what has happened is the buyer and seller motivation changes. So regardless of the economic causes, the market only shifts because the rationale of the buyers and sellers have shifted. So this becomes the number one challenge in a shift is finding the motivated. So where there was once a clear pool, now it's kind of muddy. So we have to find the motivated, and we can't motivate them. Now we can, I think in the shift book, we can aid them. We can have a different conversation, but we have to find the motivated. So that goes right back to the pipeline. So how many of you, show of hands, have a pipeline report? Okay. Pipeline report. When we think about the pipeline report, those are, right, we have our database, and then we've got the pipeline report that says, these are the people that want to do business this month. So like a 10 would be this month, a 9 would be next month, an 8 would be, in March or in April. With your buyers and your sellers, we want to start thinking of them differently now than what we thought about them even 6 months ago, 3 months ago. Because before we had a buyer lead, we would say, are they qualified? Do we know when they want to buy? Yay. Well, the challenge in today's market, that's not going to work because they've got to be willing to write a contract that's going to win an offer in today's market. And if they're not willing to do that, then they might not have the temperament for this market. So are we having those conversations? Or they might have to look at a lower price point because they're not, right now we are having offers, 40, I was talking to an agent this morning, $45,000 over ask on a cash offer. Right? Like, and in California, that's happening all the time. This one was in Florida, I believe. The same thing. If we have sellers that, well, yeah, I would move if I had this or if I had that, are they really the seller in today's market? Because sometimes we get so caught up with, I've got to find this person a house. Well, if they're not willing to do what it takes to win in this market, there's nothing we can do except educate them and help them motivate them, or let them know that this isn't the market for them to shop in and go find more people. So what are you guys hearing right now from what I'm sharing?
You really have to weed it out and narrow it down. and not work with people who cannot work right now.
Yeah. They've got to be buyers and sellers in today's market. That's going to be huge because otherwise we get bogged down in somebody that can't buy or sell right now. Yeah, absolutely. And you said weed them out. How do we make sure that we have the opportunity? How can we weed them out?
We have to do those questions. We have to say, you know, are you willing to work in this market? This is what's happening in today's market. Are you willing to go the limit? Or if not, maybe let's wait till the market softens for you.
Yeah, there. Monica Reynolds was sharing a script with us. I thought it was really cool. So think about, and this could be your listing or somebody else's listing, but whenever you're doing your buyer consultation, maybe you pull out your, an offers that you've had on a house, and of course block out the things that they can't see, but say, look, this house was, this one on the market for 300 or 400 or whatever that number is. This was the winning offer at 450, and they had no appraisal, and they waived the inspection, and whatever's appropriate in your market. Because if they're not willing to do those pieces, they're not going to win. And our job as consultants is to make sure that they know how to win, or it may not be the right time.
Mhm.
And either way is okay. We're not tying ourselves up with somebody that can't buy. Now, and I bring that up because I think we're all talking about buyers, and yet the cool part, this challenge with buyers only comes up if we don't have all of the listings, right? So, John on this call is going to have a much different experience of today's market because he took 14 listings last month than somebody that we have 14 buyers and no listing, right? So, so John, I'd love to hear from you. You had already shared a bit about what you were doing differently in January than you had even been doing last year in order to get those for sale by owner listings. What are some of the adjustments that you've started making?
So in our market, we don't have very many for sale by owners to begin with. It's like a really, at any given moment, there's probably maybe 20 good for sale by owners on the market at any given moment. So, and there's a lot of agents in our market that are calling them. So what I've done is I was basically, and I'm still doing this, I'm actually talking to them every day. Like I'm making sure that they hear from me every day. They get a phone call from me on Monday, and then they get a phone call on Friday. But in between, I'm sending them texts, market updates, what the market's doing in their price range, what is sold, what hasn't sold, so that they're constantly being aware of what the market is doing. So that whenever they, typically whenever they decide to give up and go with someone, it's usually around the 2-week mark is when they're listing, that I'm the one that they've heard of and they're ready to do something, the day that I've reached out, which is every day for the most part. So that's, that, and I wasn't doing that before. They were, last year I was probably, once a week. If they weren't ready, I would call them the next week. But in this market, with how everything's in a crunch, they're hearing from me every day. So,
wow.
and it's worked.
And it's worked, yeah. So doubling down on the communication, doubling down on providing value.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you said, because it's so often when we think about for sale by owners or even expired, people go, we don't have many in my market. Well, depending on how many you want to list, right? Like, because if you think about it, if you only have, like you said, let's say there's 20 at a given time. Well, sure, we'd love to take all 20, but if there's 20 and we took one more listing, 2 more listings from that, that's a win. And I also want to point out, so John, he also got 50% of those from his database, right? So, I look at make the calls to your database, then add on, because we use the database to earn the opportunity. Right now, Jonathan, about how many contacts are you making a day?
Right now, it's right at 20.
Right at
20 a
20.
day, yeah. which, that needs to be doubled. So
A question, could I ask, if you're talking to 20 people, how many calls is it taking you to get to those 20 people that you're having a two-way conversation?
yeah, I'm probably doubling the calls because not everyone answers.
That's not bad.
But what I've been doing, with my database, as well as the calls, is I've been what I call a real estate checkup. So, and these are the ones that I focused on, the ones like that bought with me, like between 2013 and 2016, and giving them like a quick market update on what their home is worth through text. I just have a generic text that I have saved. That way I can copy and paste. It's really quick. And then it just shows, I give them like a, if depending on what they've done to their home, I just give them like a price range on what their home would be worth today versus what they paid whenever they bought it through me, years back. And I've had really good success. That's a great way to build your pipeline. They may not be ready to list right now, but they're future listings, 6 to 12 months from now.
Do you give them that range in the text?
Yes.
I've been doing the text, and I got 4 responses last night.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to know the value of my home, but that gives me an opportunity then to go back and take a few hours this morning to do some CMAs and get back to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I basically, depending on I always word the text, depending on any changes. But I give them that range because I feel like that triggers them to want to respond.
Okay.
That starts the conversation. Once they hear, oh, my home is worth $50,000 more than what it was, compared to what I bought it, that starts a conversation.
Well, I love this. Thank you for saying that, John. And Marcia, thank you for that question, because I want some clarity. So Marcia, you said you send that, they say yes, and then you spend a couple of hours doing CMAs.
Well, I'm not saying hours. I've got 4 to do this morning is what I meant. It
Gotcha.
gave me some time
Gotcha.
to put it together, but I did give them a story. And the story was, we have one client who, after realtor fees and closings, and closing costs, is going to net 85 grand to 100 grand. So, your home may be worth significantly more than you think it is.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love that, features and benefits. So we're going to look at that piece as well today. So, John, how do you do that because, time's sake, are you kind of pulling up a whole area, or do you, and kind of give them the ballpark, or are you pulling up an actual like CMA on their house?
I mean, I'm basically, I see what they paid real quick, so I can actually go through. I'm not really doing a CMA. I can just look at their home and know what I could sell it for. I mean, I just know those numbers. So I'm not spending a lot of time doing CMAs on each house. Like, I can look at their house and like, okay, I know I can get this much.
Yeah.
So I usually know a price within 5 minutes without doing a CMA.
Yeah. So, and I point this out because this, so Jonathan took like 115, 124 listings last year.
Right.
The more you take it, the faster rate, because you're going to get more and more efficient.
Yes.
Another thing that you might look at, let's say, because again, we're talking a range. And because you might even go, so like in my area, I know that every year we go up 6%. 3 to 6%. You might look to see what you're averaging and then just take what they had and give them a range of 3 to 6% every year, every month, or whatever, so that it's very quick, and say, and like he put some language in there, depending on any changes, you have the potential of this range, right? Then if they raise their hand and go, well, I'm actually, so, okay, great. Now let's get together. I can get you a more number for you. That way we're not doing work that we don't have to do. It's the range. So I love that, like you said, it's quick and fast.
Right.
Okay. So if you guys, that would be something to write down, because even if in the past you've basically been doing buyers, the way the market's moving, even if you've got buyers from 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, John just gave you something that you could potentially use as a text to communicate with your people, this week in your database. Love that. Were you going to add something else to that, John?
I mean, I've got a couple other ideas just to help everyone build their pipeline. I didn't know if what
Yeah,
your
go ahead.
trend is or what if you wanted to wait. Or,
Yeah.
well, I mean, another thing that I've been doing. So I reach out to like all what I call the orphan clients, the listings that we represented that were represented by a different agent, and I've been calling them, and also doing that real estate checkup. And they've been very appreciative. And that's another way to build your pipeline, because those people probably don't hear from their agent as much. So that's a good way. And you're already familiar with the house because you've sold it once. So why not go back to them and provide value?
Mhm.
And that's another way to build your pipeline for sure.
That's when John shared that with me last year. I thought it was just brilliant. Does everybody get what he's talking about when he says going back to the orphan clients?
Talk to the buyers that bought the house, he's listing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that you didn't represent. And yeah, typically what we say, especially if they're not, if they were represented by a KW agent, no, but otherwise, right? And but yeah, so are you going back to the orphans? And I think John, you had even went back to like 10 years ago, right? Because we had 7 to 10 years ago, he had went back that far and started reach, even though when you first started doing that, he hadn't been, it wasn't like he'd been doing it over a long period of time. At the end of last year, he said, hey, I'm going to call them. And he just, hey, I'm Jonathan. Introduced himself and then went from there.
So how did you get their contact information?
Vulcan 7 is the best system for me.
Say that again, please.
Vulcan 7, Vulcan with a V.
Oh, Vulcan.
It's a dialing system, but you can individually put in each address and it gives cell phone numbers and email addresses.
Yeah, and Vulcan 7, and so Vulcan 7 is like Land Voice or Mojo Dialer. And I agree with John. I think Vulcan 7's the one that I've experienced the most like success with, or that's really good. It is more,
it's the most accurate for sure. Yeah.
most accurate. It's more expensive. So you might start with a different one. And yet, yeah, Vulcan 7 is really, really good. So yeah, so okay, what else can we learn from you today, Jonathan?
Oh gosh, I think that's really, let's see, the orphan clients, the real estate checkup. Trying to think if there's anything. I mean, I don't know what everyone else's market's like as far as expireds. Obviously, that's another good way to get. Oh, in our market, like everyone else, it seems like with inventory shortage. So what we've been doing, and so if we have a particular buyer that's looking for something, specific, and it's not listed. So what I'll do for the team, I've got 2 buyers agents. What I'll do is I'll take that criteria, plug it in our MLS, and look up properties that have closed. I'll go back I picked 2013. I always do like a range. So if they're looking for something, with a pool, a 3-car garage in this price range, I'll look and see what has sold during those years, and I'll call those sellers or those owners. I'm like, hey, I seen you've been in the house for 5 years. I just wanted to check in and see how everything is going and see if you had any real estate plans coming up, and then kind of get them to ease into talking with me, and then go into, hey, have you thought about, I'd be happy to give you a market analysis to see what your home would sell for now. I think you'd be very surprised. And we actually picked up an authorization. I got one signed this morning because I told him, I said, I feel really confident that we could get you $100,000 more than what you paid in 2017. And it checks off every box for our buyers. So we're going to be showing it tomorrow. So it really, going back to those people and just reaching out saying, hey, I have a potential buyer, or I feel like you could get, a much bigger price than what you paid. That's a good way to spark a conversation with a future seller. So
what stands out to you guys about what Jonathan just did?
Well, he's killing 2 birds with 1 stone there.
Yeah. Yeah. And he changed the story. So what I'm hearing over and over and over, and I'm sure you all are, oh, the market's crazy, the market's crazy. Don't you want to sell? Well, that does, unless I'm already thinking about it, it doesn't, right? Like it doesn't really connect with me. What Jonathan just did is focused on the benefit. You know, like, hey, because think about it. If somebody, you know, at what price would you have to, you know, would you get for your house that you'd go, okay, I'll take that. So he changed the conversation. And for those people, the $100,000 was worth it for them to go, hey, yeah, absolutely. I'd be interested in doing that piece. That right there is an agent that is creating urgency, that is being intentional, not just waiting around to see what happens, right? To see what somebody else lists, that type of thing. So that's awesome.
Do you, Jonathan, do you also go over your buyer criteria with them and say, I have buyers looking, or you save that?
Yeah, it just depends, how that conversation goes. But yes, that might make it more appealing to them to show that, hey, I do have a serious buyer that's looking for something exactly like yours, and that opens them up to being more comfortable with doing an authorization to show, or even talk about listing also. So yeah, I do.
Yeah. So so that's, again, it's, are we being intentional? And I love the idea of when we're lead generating, are we lead generating with listings in mind? Because if we're lead generating for listings in mind, even when we're talking to our database, we're talking to orphan clients, that type of thing, we're going to find buyers. And right now, right, it's finding those listings. And if somebody's on the phone and maybe you're a buyer's agent and you're like, well, Olivia, well, no, this is the cool part. Are you calling for sell by owners? Because guess what? You probably have somebody that fits them and they need to buy a home as well most times, right? So if everybody on the team right now is looking for listings, then there's more opportunities for the buyer agents as well. So it works hand in hand. And yeah, so John just demonstrated changing that conversation, right? And then how many of us are having conversations around the impact that interest rates are on affordability right now, right? So something that I'm going to suggest, write this down, am I mastering communication? Because just what, Jonathan gave us an example of changing the conversation. Are we also changing the conversation in the sense of, and do not use these particular numbers because I did this on a mortgage app. You would want your mortgage person to actually do these. But when you think about the what you can buy with the affordability in today's market. So what if you had, and use the house prices in your area, right? But let's say you had a picture of a house and it said, if your average house price is 200,000, if use that, if it's not, use 700, whatever your average price. So a $200,000 house, 5% interest. And you would say, 4% interest rate, 5% down, your monthly note's going to be right here. Then you had a picture of a house that is 200,000 more that said 5%, a 2.7% interest rate, how much, 5% down, same amount down, and then you had that monthly note. Because of the interest rate, you're only looking at about a $40 to $50 difference in those monthly notes. So are we saying things like looking for a larger house and keeping the same monthly note at now, right? So, right, are we selling the benefit of just sellers versus just the feature of the market's hot?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So So we've got some different ideas around, and I think Jonathan gave us some really great ones to start utilizing right now. And then of course, are we shifting our lead generation to finding sellers? Along the way, you're going to find buyers, but are we looking for sellers?
The one you, Olivia, the one you just described about the note, is that something that you see as a Facebook ad, or is it a conversation?
So I actually think that could be something that you could email to your database. It's something that you could make it as a JPEG and put it on your Facebook. In the appropriate times, it could be something that, that picture, if you were talking to somebody about it, you could say, hey, look at this, and text them that. Because a lot of us think, well, everybody that has like a 4% interest rate, like they've already refinanced. But then, and I can't remember if it's somebody that's on today's call or not, but I was talking to I think it was maybe you, Sylvia, that you were recently talking to somebody and they were still at, over a 4% interest rate. So they were able to get them, refinanced. But so that's the ticket, is not everybody has refinanced. And so again, like I can live where I live now, or because of that affordability, I can finally buy that house that I want and keep my monthly note about the same. That's pretty exciting. Are we telling that story?
Yeah, I did go through when the pandemic first hit, and I went through and I offered people to, get their mortgage reduced. I gave them referrals to some of my lenders, and they successfully got their mortgage reduced. I also offered out, we have a company that we work with in-house for insurance. And I offered out, just give a call, have a conversation with them, and they can probably lower your insurance rates. And a lot of people did that successfully as well.
And so this is the cool part, because you've been making those calls and the care calls, you may even be able to get a little bit more, I'm going to say aggressive or direct in some of your calls when you're calling people to say, like calling them directly and saying, hey, are you, our inventory is really low. How much would you need to get for your house in order to be willing to sell right now? You might be surprised at the number that they give you, and you might go, I can actually get you that. And then, so again, are we switching the story? Are we having the right conversations? So we talked a little bit about motivation. We talked about some different ways we can be intentional with our database, with the conversations. What I want to now look at is, and this call is really setting up the other calls that we're going to have this month. Because I want to make sure, again, it is having the conversation. And then when we have the at bat, are we saying the things that are going to cause us to get the listing? And at the right price, because even in a market that's going up, right, we want to make sure, that we've got something that's sellable. So I've got a couple of questions, or requests, I guess. Number one, is your listing presentation one that will win in today's market? Right? And listing presentation, I think sometimes we think it's got to be this formal iPad or no, I mean the conversation that you're having. So like John, when you go in to do your listing presentations, is it more the conversation that you're having with them, or do you bring any other than do you bring in other aids for that?
Well, like when I'm meeting with my presentations are different, because if I'm meeting with a repeat or a sphere, that's a lot different. Typically, I'm not up against anyone. So it's just going over a few pieces of our marketing and just setting the price. Now, if I'm visiting with a for sale by owner, you know, I do what they taught us in bold is the problem presentation. And then at every appointment, I always bring the pre-listing packet, and we just actually revamped our pre-listing packet and took out some pieces and replaced it with different things. But it just goes over like our numbers, our average days on market. But I mean, for the most part, yeah, when I'm, you know, the problem presentation is a very simple one to easily memorize. I mean, that's, you know, that's, and it helps the for sell by owner that you're meeting with, you know, realize that, you know, hey, you know, I'm missing, you know, 90% of the market by staying for sell by owner. So it's a really simple presentation to learn, really.
And when you're talking about the problem presentation, because some of the people on here either haven't been a bold or that was, I find that a lot of people kind of gloss over that. That's when that's the piece where you're talking about there are 4 different types of buyers in this market.
Yes. Yeah.
So if anybody that doesn't have that and you'd like that, let me know and I can send that to you. Or I'll email it to everybody. Or you know what we'll do is we'll upload it into the hub. So it'll just be there. We'll put the problem presentation right there. So the cool part, or what I want you guys to hear from Jonathan, is he knows what he's going to say when he walks in. And then he tailors it to fit the person. Because if he was doing a repeat or referral and they were going to interview other people, he knows that too. So that goes right back to you. Do you know your entire listing presentation so well, like, you know, that you can nail it, and then you just pull out the pieces that are fitting for this conversation, but you want to know it all, right? So number one, I would say, do you have that? One of the things that I would love, or my request is for everybody on this call, record your listing presentation, send it to me. I'll review it, make some notes. We'll just keep getting better and better, right? Because again, if we get an at bat, we want to make sure that we nail that at bat. Okay, so your listing presentation, do you have one that works in this market? We know, like, buyer consultation, do you have one that works in this market? We looked at that. The verbiage, are you practicing scripts for today's market? Like some of the things that John already shared with, you know, the text message, the conversations. Those are going to be, you know, when we look at, because we can look at and thank you so much for Louise for putting this in our chat box from the Pivot Shift Zoom call yesterday. Somebody had posted, you know, by 11 a.m. door knock, circle prospect, direct, or no, these were the 8 things that you could do: door knock, circle prospect, direct mail, for sub owners, expired for sub or expired withdrawn, networking, team rally, and then a farming agent. All of these are things that you can do. Start with your database and then pick one seller specific, and yet be aware of these things. So when, you know, as I say, we're getting ready for the rest of the calls that we're going to do. Some of the things that we can start doing right now is, are we making enough contacts? We have to make more contacts in this market than we used to make. So just wrap our mind around that. In Pivot Shift, I thought this was a really cool idea. They talked about 20 calls in the morning, and then in the afternoon, 20 messages, text message, Instagram, Facebook, like James said, carrier pigeon, it doesn't matter, right? But you might decide to break those up. And if you have a virtual assistant or an admin, tell them what message they could individually send some messages through some of those portals for you as well. But so number one, we've got to be making more contacts so we can find those people that are motivated. So whenever we look at, well, I don't have any listings, or how do I get listings? Are you making enough contacts? So then we go, some of us may be thinking, well, I don't have enough time. Well, what needs to get off of your plate? Do you have a transaction manager? Okay, I have that. What else can I get rid of? And just keep working on what can you get rid of, because this is the number one, right? So your listing presentation, will it win in today's market? What are the conversations that you need to practice? And some of those things that John shared with us. Are we telling the right story? Are we talking about the benefit of the market for sellers right now? And the cool part is the benefit of the buyers right now, it's the interest rate. Right? But because of the interest rate, instead of only being able to afford a $400,000 house, they can get a $600,000 house or whatever rate. And again, in your average, so are you telling the story? All right, so, and then knowing, so again, we go back to listing presentation. Are we having, like, this is the listing presentation we're having with repeat referral clients. This is what I want to say. This is, if we're having a listing presentation with somebody that's not, are we where we need to be? So I'm going to send out some examples of some different listing presentations for you guys to review. You might not use anything from them. It doesn't, right? It goes right back to, is yours effective in today's market? Because it might have been effective and now it's not. So, and then next week, we're actually going to have, Teresa's going to come in the call, and she's going to do 2 pieces for us. Right now, her listings, she's in, and I thought she was a great one for us to interview, because she's in Colorado. So her listings are selling anywhere from 10, 13, 15% over list price. And she's also winning, she's winning all the offers that she's writing. She mainly deals with her sphere and repeat and referral. So I want to kind of dig into, because a lot of our business is that piece. So what are we saying to them to get them to list and to stage it and all of those things, so we're driving up the price? What's the conversation, and how are we winning those offers with the multiple offers? Because it really does start with that initial conversation. And then I haven't asked John, so I'm going to put him on the spot, but maybe John would come back in at the, one of our other calls and maybe do a listing presentation or show us what he's doing, even in more detail around, because so often we forget about for sale by owners, because we say there's not that many. Well, if there's 10, if you get 1, that's more than you had, right? And then the expireds, just like what John talked about, going back and maybe now's the time to go back and pull the expireds from 5 years ago that didn't sell. They might now want to sell, right? So those are just some options. And then knowing that this year is different than last year. Are you doubling down on your contacts? Are you getting things off of your plate so that you can make those contacts? All right, so I want to hear from you guys. What did you hear? What did you learn? What are you going to implement? What questions do you have? And then we'll go ahead and start wrapping up.
I'd like to see John's for sale by owner pre-list package. I mean, the best thing I ever did in my entire life was a pre-list package. And I have one for luxury homes and I have a regular one. And it's, I mean, once I get there, it's a matter of, do you have any questions? And then we move on. Here's the market.
And John, do you, I know you said you have a pre-list packet. He actually takes his with him. He doesn't even send it beforehand.
Yeah, I take mine with me. We're getting ready to revamp it again, where we're going to turn it into a actual magazine, to where it looks a little more sleek whenever we're presenting it to the seller. And then we may And then if everything goes well, then we email the seller a PDF copy of that same exact, but it's going to be in a magazine form. But I can put my cell phone number in the chat box. If everyone wants to text me their email address, I can send you a copy because I have it on PDF on my computer. I can just zip over an email with that if everyone wants to review it.
Yeah.
I actually have a link in Dropbox. There's a public file folder, and you can put a link there where you can actually email the link to your PDF.
Okay, great.
Because the PDF is so large, it won't go through email most of.
Well, and yeah, and if you do have an issue doing that, John, if you just send it to me, then I can make sure everybody gets it either way.
That might be easier. Yeah, I can just do that.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, let's just do that. If you'll send it to me, then, and if you're okay with it, I'll upload it in the hub and everybody can access it from there.
Right.
I will say that we deliver ours 2 days ahead.
Mhm.
And the beauty of that is they have time to go through it at their leisure. We include some snacks, put it in a gift bag, put it on their front porch. It gives my husband a chance to introduce himself when he delivers it. And it has worked beautifully, because if I take it with me, then I have to go through it. If I deliver it ahead of time, they've already read it.
Yeah.
That's just the way we do it. Not
Yeah.
that, I mean, you obviously list a whole lot more than I do. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, most of the for sale by owners that I meet, though, I usually meet them like that same day that I call them. So for time purposes, I wouldn't normally have time to drop it off and then go back the same day. I just bring it all at the same time, because my goal is to get in front of them ASAP and not wait days or even a week. 'Cause
Yeah.
at that point they may already be sold or someone got to them before me.
I was just referring to regular clients, not.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
All right, perfect. All right, so heard from Marcia. So what about you, Andy? What did you get from today's call?
Well, I love the idea of sending out the market analysis, or, the price range to your previous sellers and previous buyers. I like the orphan tactic. That's a great one. Yeah, I'm going to start implementing some of these right away. I do think that these would be helpful. I need something new. I'm sort of in a grind where, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And so some of these are great ideas.
Love it. And the big thing too with the ideas is we're going to have a lot all around this. So kind of picking one or two and like implementing those pieces. So I love that. All right, Sylvia, Paula, what are y'all getting from this?
So for me, I know I need to just find more time in the day to make the contacts. And contacting my sphere is probably what's going to generate the most return for me. I have not done for sale by owners yet, and I definitely want to start doing more of that. So any kind of information that you can share, about just presentations for sale by owners is something I definitely, like, and I really liked what Marcia said about, just having kind of like a little snack pack and a pre listing presentation to provide. But at the same time, what Jonathan said, time is of the essence. So it kind of depends on, how you navigate through that, but using more of those kinds of strategies is what I liked.
Well, and I love, and let all of us. So like with Paula, with what you said is, before you even go the for sale by owners, let's make sure your sphere's called. That's going to be the gold. And I was thinking about, like, we earn the right to go to the next piece because we've got our sphere done, and that way we're working on one piece and then the other, because that is going to be where your biggest opportunity is going to start with the sphere. And then I love the idea of a pre-listing packet, and they're great. And I love, make sure that, and this isn't just for you, Paula, but for everybody, let's make sure that we're not spending a lot of time getting ready to get ready, right? Because you can call them and go without a pre-listing packet. It's a great additive, but let's get that listing let's focus on getting the listing appointments, and then we can add some of those pieces. Now, if you're already getting the listing appointments and now you want to add, that's great, but you know, let's make sure we're in the right order. So I love that piece. All right.
Mhm.
All right, who's next?
I'll go.
All right, Jesse.
Go ahead.
So what I got out of it today was just being proactive about looking for or lead generating with listings in mind. Going back to the database and saying, like you said, here in Iowa, we'll go up in price 3 to 5% a year and just say, hey, here's your potential price range now since you bought with me back 4 or 5 years ago, whatever. So yeah, and I'm sure when we'll be talking about this on our call today.
All right, perfect. All right, Sylvia.
Make sure that you're saying the right things. I mean, it's very easy to say, but on my last listing presentation Friday, I learned certain things that I have to improve, and I need to tackle my listing presentation in order for me to be ready for having as many listing presentations a week as possible, because listings is what's going to bring us also buyers. Otherwise, we are a business. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
being ready for those at bats. All right, Luis, and then John.
I appreciated what was shared, Jonathan. I love the market analysis and Olivia, I love the interest rate comparison. I'm wondering how to translate that into a smart plan, or wonder if someone already has throughout our KW network, because that would be a great smart plan to blast to our sphere.
Well, and it's I've got it. The challenge, and I'm actually planning on. The reason I hesitate to make it a picture, because it really is just going to be a picture, is because I want and I might do it for you guys where I create it as a picture but make it like editable. Because the big thing is I want you got to then take that to your lender and make sure you have all the legal stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to give you a picture, you send it out, and then you get in trouble because of like it doesn't match some state law about. But I can create it with the agreement that everybody will go to your lender and say, is that in our area, and what legal stuff do we need to have on there? And then yes, and then you could turn around and utilize that.
And then I'm getting a lot of Facebook ad leads. I have great success with the Facebook ad getting the leads, but not converting them. So I'm wondering if anyone has had any good scripts for that.
For today's call, just for sake of time, I'm going to ask them not to answer that, and I'm going to point you back to the the hub that we have. There is, I think it's at the top. There's like, it says a lead to close, and there's 2 different follow-up plans for the Facebook ad leads.
Okay.
Look at that. See if you have that in place. If you do, or if you don't, let's put that in place. If you do, then let's talk about the next step. You and I'll have that.
Thanks.
All right. All right. And then Jonathan, what about for you today?
Yeah, for me, there was 2 things. Just doubling down on our contacts. And I'm used to making 20, so I need to be doing 40 per day. And don't get bogged down with unmotivated people.
Yeah. It's so easy to do because we feel like, because they said they wanted to, we feel like we have to be their champion. Sometimes being their champion is saying, in this market, this is not the market for you. And then let's go to the ones that we can help. Okay. And then Hobie, I think you are going to be our last person. We'll wrap up with you.
I think for me, just listening today, because I'm really low on listings this year, and I'm realizing I've been so database focused since 2013 that I just wait for the phone to ring, and it rings, and I get my business and do my business. I'm starting to realize this market is a little bit stressed for this year because the phone's not ringing. So I'm starting to realize that just, from this conversation, that I'm going to have to do some stuff differently this year, I think, than I've done before. And I remember being on the Gary's top 100 individual agents mastermind, one of the calls last year. He was talking about your database, and I really didn't take it to heart about, you shouldn't be getting all your business from your database, but I have been really since 2013. So I've really got to start doing something and having some different avenues of business. So this is good for me to hear. I hate working with for sale by owners and expireds, and if I do, I've got to find something different, or learn to do it. So I just got to do some things differently.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's for all of us, right? We can look at the thing, because it's, what are we more committed to? Like, okay, I don't want to call for sale owners, or, oh, I want I need those funds, or my retirement, my whatever. And yet even in your database, Hobie, I think about your database is such a strong database. Can you take some of those things that John shared and find some of your past buyers?
Yes.
Then, with a text going, hey, when you bought, what about this?
Right.
And
I love the orphan thing, because I've thought about that in the past and never really did anything. I could even start with that, with even just a note from send out cards or something, just saying, hey, I work, you bought a listing for me 10 years ago and you've never moved. Chances are none of those agents are calling them, or got out of the business or retired or whatever. So that I think could potentially be some to add to my database and some potential clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, and I think I had the conversation, I think sometimes we think for sale owners, expireds, because we think in our mind, I don't like that. And it's probably because we're thinking that we need to work them a certain way. So Jonathan, because again, it goes right back to what's my intent. So Jonathan he's freaking a machine with for sale owners, and he calls and he hammers out those phones. But his goal is to, like you said, list 6, 7, 8 of those a month. Well, you might, like, maybe you go, you know what, I want to list 2 expireds or 3 for sale owners or whatever. Maybe there are people that have that do mail campaigns to them. Now it's slower, you're not going to get as much, but how do we make sure that we stay fascinated with, if I were to get that business, how could I do it? Right. That way, instead of thinking it has to be one way, there may be other opportunities for us to look. And then Hobie, in your area, right? Maybe it's farming, or maybe it's letter campaigns, or there's all kind of things. But I love the idea of, we want to start with our database, and then we go and get business from other places as well. So that's 50% of our business.
Yeah, and I was one other thing you guys were talking about when you're talking about trying to find listings for buyers. If you're working with buyers, I have a decent letter that I used last year, started using last year, and it actually was successful. I used this letter to send it out to 36 people in a neighborhood, and I actually got a over $500,000 deal for my buyer on a house that wasn't listed yet. And they ended up using their own agent, which was fine, but we didn't have to compete for it. It never went to the MLS, and never got to multiple offers, and never drove the price up. I got my guys a great deal because the people didn't want to list it. So I could send that letter to Olivia if you want to share it. It works. It's simple, but it works.
Yeah, simple is, yeah, absolutely. Share that with me, and we'll put that in the hub and send it out. That'd be awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, and then so I will say this, and I can't remember if I heard this on the shift call or from Jonathan or something, but one of the things, even when you're talking about, like, right now, and I've heard agents say this around, well, like for sale owners, maybe for sale owners now think they can get more because the market's so hot, they don't need a realtor. Well, Mr. For sale owner, okay, let's say that you can get, like, only the people on your street know the house is for sale. So let's say you can get 10,000 more. Can you imagine the maximum you can get when I can expose it to thousands, right? Let's do the right thing and get you the most money for the house. So, okay, awesome. That's where we're going to wrap. Y'all have an amazing week. And we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.